This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglin.
I am the boating fool, ignoring all the rules. I don't play it safe for me or my mates. I never went to boating school. I am the boating fool. One look, and I know you'll simply agree you won't go boating with me, because I am the boating fool. We go inside outdoors to talk about boating and how not to let it make summer a bummer. We dive in next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
Helicopter rescue swimmer Mike Bayersky, United States Coast Guard.
Chances are the Coast Guard wasn't there when you went overboard. But when you wear a Coast Guard-approved life jacket, we're closer than you think. Closer when you jet ski, fish, tube, canoe, kayak. There for close calls, when help isn't close at all.
Kentucky conservation officers remind you your life jacket's got your back. And the backing of the best swimmers everywhere.
At the absolute worst, it was a little white lie.
A little white lie.
After all, when it hit the line, it felt like a 15-pounder. It doesn't matter what the scale says. So it might be an ever so slight deviation from the truth.
Sometimes in fishing, the truth is hard to catch.
Maybe just a stretch.
But the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife reminds you, fishing isn't about math. It's about fun.
And fudging a little if you need to.
Kentucky Fishing.
It'll make a liar out of you.
This is Kentucky Afield Radio, my home address for the next hour. My name is Charlie Baglin, and it is time for summer boating season. This coming week, May 19th through the 25th, is National Safe Boating Week. And traditionally, this program devotes time to boating safety, the thrills and sometimes chills of it all. My guests are with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife's Division of Law Enforcement. Conservation Officer Jared Alley from his post on Lake Cumberland, Major Shane Carrier, and Boater Education Chief Zach Campbell are in the studio with me. But first, Kentucky is to be congratulated on an award it got not that long ago, back in March, for the very best in media. This was radio media, and I think that's neat because this is a radio show, and we air those commercials on this program for Your Life Jacket's Got Your Back. This is the second year in a row that it's gotten the award from the International Boating and Water Safety Summit. That's the big daddy when it comes to recreational boating. Yes. Who here can better describe what that meeting is all about down in San Antonio?
It's a collection of the premier boater safety people throughout not only the nation but the world. It's a collection of representatives from all 50 states. We've got people from Canada, Guam, Japan, Australia, just a collection of all the best boating minds.
So this is legit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's each country at the opening ceremonies walks, presents their flags. Everyone gets together and brings all the best things they have from their state or country and shares it. It's really actually a great boating venue.
So this is global boating, and this covers law enforcement, training, education, media awareness, public awareness, anything I've left out. So it covers the basis for boating.
It does.
New equipment, too, I presume. Our program here focuses on radio and the Your Life Jacket's Got Your Back campaign. It won first place internationally last year, and you all did a really good job of making sure that Kentucky's efforts were first place again this year, and my hat's off to you. I like what you did by including a partner in that. I remember one particular commercial involved the United States Coast Guard, and you may not see them riding around on fish and wildlife boats, but their name is right there because we say, or you say, wear a Coast Guard approved life jacket. And so I really like how this has all come about. But there is more to boating than a good slogan. And that's what we want to talk about some today. Summer boating, National Safe Boating Week is going on. And you three fellas, Zachary with Boater Education, Officer Jared Alley from Lake Cumberland, and Major Shane Carrier, the Boating Law Administrator. Now, that's a mouthful of words. What's a boat law administrator do?
Well, the boating law administrator, each state in the nation has a designated individual that serves as their boating law administrator that works hand in hand with the U.S. Coast Guard, the National Safe Boating Council, and there's an association, NASBLA, the National Association of State Boating Law Administrators. It's basically a way for states to have representatives that can get together, compare notes, have discussions about current boating laws, the future of safe boating in the United States, new trends, new enforcement techniques. It's a group that can get together and share ideas to make sure the nation's waterways are safe from state to state. The enforcement is consistent from state to state, and it's an effort to mirror the U.S. Coast Guard, the federal laws, and make sure the states are on board and the laws are somewhat consistent across the nation.
Holy cow. That's a lot. Yeah, I was thinking that boating was just something fun you went out and did on a Saturday. Well, apparently I'm wrong.
That's what we want it to be, but we want it to be safe and fun.
Why is something so fun, and I'm going to liken this to horseback riding or bicycling or skateboarding. Why is boating something so fun and recreational have to be so doggone regulated?
The whole potential for drowning puts a whole new aspect on it. If you fall off a horse, you might break a bone or two, or there's the potential there for fatality, but the likelihood is higher if you fall off a boat versus a horse. You're sharing the water with the general public. The waters are open to the public, so there has to be some regulations, just like on our highways or anything else, to maintain order and safety.
I have a list in front of me, and a lot of these notes were taken right from the 2013-14 Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide, and that's free wherever you buy your fishing license. And it's also on the internet at fw.ky.gov, G-O-V. And so I want to go down point by point here. We've got you all for an hour, and talk about some of the things that are maybe overlooked. Officer Alley down at Lake Cumberland, people ever pose the same question to you, saying, why do I really need this life jacket, or why do I need this navigation light?
We get that question all the time down here. Of course, I think one of the big things is just the number of people you have in a confined area when dealing with boating. Of course, we've had a drawdown in the lake the last few years. It's coming back up now, which is good news. But it's just the high number of people, the high number of traffic you have in a real confined space. That's why the life jackets are so important. The running lights as well. It's the regulations. That's to help keep it fun. It seems like your impact on the water, while you know what's going on in your boat, it's sometimes difficult for people to pay attention to the other boats. They let their guard down, it seems like. So we try to, down here especially, try to teach them when we pull up, check a boat, ask for their personal flotation devices. A lot of times they're locked in a locker somewhere. Occasionally they'll still have the wrapping on them. And, we tell them we don't necessarily cite for that always. It's just we tell them, could you get that out and get it on if you needed it? Especially with the kids. My family, I have nearly a 2-year-old, and it takes quite a while to get a PFD on him, especially if he's not wanting to cooperate. So we just try to make sure that the equipment is in the boat and available to them. Hopefully they won't need it, but we want it to be accessible.
Zach, when you're teaching lessons, you're part of boater education class. Do you get participants in that class to say, holy cow, I didn't know there was so much to this? I just didn't. And they look at it as if maybe it's overkill?
Some people will think of it as overkill, but then I've had students that have been boating their whole life, and they're 60 years old, and they come away from the class still with a lot of knowledge that they never knew existed. And a difference between why it might have to be regulated compared to other recreational activities is there are set rules, but the public isn't as educated about it as possible. There is a way to do it safely, but you got to know the right way and safe things to do while on the water.
Is boating a privilege or is it a pleasure? I was told once back in high school, I think I was 16, sir, driving is a privilege, and that privilege can be removed. Is the same apply to boating?
It does. I think it's a little of both. Done correctly, it is a privilege, and if you're not boating and following the proper guidelines out there and you're not acting in a safe manner, yes, we can remove that privilege and remove you from the water. Some people look at it as overregulation. They equate it to life jacket wear and the helmet law with motorcycles. But we're trying to make them understand that if they fall out of the boat and do hit their head and become unconscious, that life jacket is going to save them. Our laws, while they are in place to protect oneself, the primary focus is to keep boaters from hurting each other. You know, navigation lights so other people can see where you're at so you don't have a collision. Rules of the road as far as idle speed and damage. And we're trying to, like Officer Alley said, regulate a large amount of people, boaters, in a confined area.
Major, let me cut you there. The music is playing. That means we got to get to a commercial break. The subject is summer boating. More in a minute. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is the National Safe Boating Week special edition of Kentucky Afield Radio. Baglin on board, talking with Major Shane Carrier and Conservation Officer Jared Alley, specialist in marine law enforcement in Kentucky, and Kentucky's man for everything boating education, Zach Campbell. You mention law enforcement and you say, we recommend this, we recommend that, we remind you. Who is the we? Now, I know that the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Division of Law Enforcement is charged with the marine law enforcement for recreational boating in the Commonwealth.
That's correct.
It doesn't start and stop with you, though. It seems like I've seen the Coast Guard. There may be a sheriff's office or two out there with a boat. Who are some of your partners around the state?
Okay, that you are correct. We do have some that assist us. We are the primary enforcement across the state, but there are some local sheriff's departments that also have boats. Louisville Metro Police has a river patrol unit. The U.S. Coast Guard has a law enforcement faction that spends time on our major navigable waterways. There's a partnership across the state, more so in some areas than others, but we work together with our local law enforcement to try to all work towards a common goal.
Either one of you law enforcement fellows, there's a lot of water out there, 9,000 miles of fishable streams, not all navigable. There are countless numbers of privately owned lakes and state-owned lakes and the big boys like Kentucky Lake and Barkley and Cumberland. Is it possible to cover all the water? How close can you come?
It's not possible. We try to have as much of a presence during the peak activity times as we can. We, just as you said, it's recreational boating safety, which means people are there recreating, primarily on the weekends. We're basically policing people's recreation, so when the majority of the people are off, we need to be working because we know that's when they're going to be at the lake. There can be issues any day of the week, of course. There's people that use our waterways every day of the year, 365 days a year, but there are peak times that we know that's when we're going to have that crowd, that large amount of people in a confined area. So we focus our attentions on that. We try to have an officer on each body of water across the state during these peak times, multiple officers on the bigger bodies of water to hopefully respond to calls for service. But that just goes to emphasize the importance of delivering the safe boating message. The more we can get that message out there to the boating public about safety, hopefully that will make our waterways safe and not have such a need for an officer on every corner of every body of water, because it's not feasible. We have 144 officers in our division right now that are sworn that work the field. We're working to increase that number, but, with budget constraints, getting that number increased is an uphill battle.
So there's 144 conservation officers in boats across the state, and a lot more water than 144 officers can really cover.
That's correct.
I'm going to guess, let's talk about people like to go out boating on rivers. Say we mentioned the Cumberland, Kentucky. Let's say you could get a boat somewhere in the Little Kentucky, the Salt, Clark's River, the Licking River. There are rivers, Green River, all over the state. You might as well tell them, you're kind of on your own without a lifeguard out here. Zach, do boater education courses in Kentucky emphasize that if there's a problem, it's kind of up to you and maybe a boater nearby to rescue the situation first?
What we really focus on is preparing each operator and everyone that's going to be on the vessel to know what to do, know where your safety equipment is, and to avoid a bad situation in the first place. And then also the course will touch on what to do if the worst does happen.
I wanted to get into some specifics about what you need to be legal. But at the opening of this program, we were talking about the International Boating and Water Safety Summit and the award you all brought home, and the people that attend this from all around the planet. Is boating in Kentucky the same as boating in Melbourne, Australia, as it is in Germany? Are boating laws the same? Are accidents the same?
Yeah, they're similar. It's strikingly similar around the world, and it's interesting to go to a summit like that and talk to people from these other nations and see what kind of issues they're having. And it's interesting that many times it's the same type of issues that we have here in the States or here in the Commonwealth. Accident occurrences, contributing factors to accidents are pretty well standard around the world. What causes accidents here in the States are some of the same things over there. You know, there are places around the world where the boating laws don't exist, but the more developed countries that have a structured law in place, it's very similar.
We are talking with Zach Campbell, who is the boating education coordinator in Kentucky, Officer Jared Alley from his post on Lake Cumberland, and Major Shane Carrier, who's in charge of everything boating law in the state. National Safe Boating Week is upon us, and we want anybody that goes out, they want to be safe and legal too. So let me just throw the question out there. First of all, what do you got to do to be legal?
Usually when I approach a boat, it's going to sort of vary on what the boat's doing. If they're actively engaged in fishing, for example, I want to check for current registration on the vessel. Of course, I want to check for their appropriate fishing licenses. If they have fish on board, I want to check the creel and size limits. I want to check for their personal flotation devices and other safety equipment they're supposed to have, depending on the boat size. You know, if they're appropriate size, they're also supposed to have the throwable device. I'm going to check for a fire extinguisher. That's depending on if there's some kind of combustible material on board. I want to check for any kind of signal device they have, whether it be whistle, air horn, anything like that. And while I'm there doing all this other stuff, I'm also going to see if I can observe any indicators of any kind of impairment. If it's a pleasure boat, I want to do the current registration and the safety equipment and check impairment.
A lot of this just sounds like pure common sense.
It is. You know, we've got some people that have boated their entire life. Most people, if you do a boat inspection on them, they show you an oar or a paddle, and they're like, well, I've got this, which we actually don't require, but you know, it's obvious they've been in a situation before when that oar or paddle has came in handy for them. I would equate it sort of like driving a car that, you know, you didn't have a seat in. It's sitting on a concrete block or something. It's just sort of, I wouldn't be in a boat without life.
Hey, I used to have one of those.
And once upon a time I had an old Jeep that we redid, and I did the same thing.
There was a long list of things that you just rattled off, and every one of those can be found in the current edition of the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide, and that's available free. Tell me where all you can pick this up.
You can get them from any of your local sporting goods stores, Walmart, Kmart, anywhere that you can buy a fishing or hunting license. You can pick these up. Most of us, if you see a marked truck with some of us in it, most of us have copies of these in our truck. We get asked for them all the time, so we keep some handy. I keep the boating guides and fishing guides in my boat. Most of the marinas, they keep them on hand. Of course, they also sell licenses.
Easily found.
It's easily found. It's available on our website. In this new technological age, you can get on your smartphone and access it.
Let's go through a few points. One that's near and dear to my heart is life jackets. What kind do you have to have? Who needs them? You have to wear them? What's the story on a life jacket?
Currently, in a boat, you have to have a life jacket that is properly fitted and Coast Guard approved for each person in that vessel. All children ages 12 and under, if the motorboat is underway, they have to have that on, securely fastened. There's a lot of the newer style, the inflatable life jackets. For me to count that as being part of your safety equipment, you're going to need it on. Also, vessels 16 feet and greater have to have a Type 4 throwable device.
A Type 4 throwable device. What in the world is that?
About the easiest way I know how to explain that to you is a cushion. Most people sit on them. The square cushions have two handles.
Gotcha.
A lot of the bigger boats, the rental fleets down here, they have the ring buoys. It's a big, looks like a lifesaver with handles on it. Throwable device is common terminology for it because it usually has some kind of handle or something on it that if someone's struggling in the water, that you can toss it to them. It seems like that's a lot safer than you going out there on your own, potentially ending up with 2 drowning victims.
Your life jacket's got your back, and I bet it's one of the more ignored pieces on the boat.
It is. You're correct. It's one of the most common violations that we encounter as officers on the water, and it is one of the most important pieces of equipment you can have. That's why we are so adamant about having it. We check everybody we encounter to make sure they have one while they're on the water. And like Officer Alley said, there's some requirements for the children under 12. They must have it on when the boat's underway. That's not true for adults. It must be on the boat and readily accessible, but you don't have to wear it. And because that's the case, many of them feel like it's insignificant or unimportant, which couldn't be any further from the truth. And we're trying to make people understand that, especially if you're by yourself, if you're a fisherman alone, I don't care how great of a swimmer you are, if you stand up on the bow of your boat for whatever reason and happen to fall, if you hit the water, you can swim, but if you were to hit your head on the way out and knock yourself unconscious, which is highly likely, you're going to drown.
If you are mad, if you have a fish hook in your cheek, if you have hit your head, if you are swimming down when you think you're swimming up, if you're cold, if you're unconscious, if you're hurt, dazed, confused, have on waders, I'm telling you, the list is long of why you need a life jacket. And why just because you don't want to fool with the things is the silliest notion you probably come up with all day.
And cold water situations just adds that extra element that makes it far more dangerous if you're not wearing a life jacket.
Your life jacket's got your back. We're talking about summer boating, and buddy, you tell me when it gets any better than that. Kentucky Conservation Officers, more with the fellows who are on your side to keep it a safe summer. When we come back, this is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. I am Charlie Baglin, and I will toss something out there for stream boaters, such as canoes and kayaks. We know that water is public, and it's okay to float on it. And most land underneath is private. So let's say you want to get out of your boat. You would like to make a rest stop, drag your canoe around a downed tree, go fishing. When is it legal to be out of your boat on private land and not be trespassing? We'll have the answer after the fishing report.
This is Tom with your fishing report from the Northeast. This spring's weather has been up and down in terms of temperature, so a lot of fishing opportunities have been heating up, cooling back, and then heating up again. This is definitely the case with musky fishing up on Cave Run Lake, where the anglers have had an up and down spring. I've heard reports that bladed baits are finally starting to pick up and that the fish are a bit scattered still at this point. Deep, shallow, being caught trolling and casting. Other than the muskie on Cave Run, the weeds are starting to pick up, and if the temperatures were a little bit closer to normal for this time of the year, you'd be looking at the end of both the bass and the crappie spawn. As it is, you may be picking up a few scragglers still going through the process, but your best bet might be to start looking towards the weed bed on the bass and the cover for the crappie. That should do it for us in the Northeast. Fishing opportunities have been rapidly changing in the area, so the best thing to do might be to head to the lake with a couple ideas in your head of what to fish for and hit up whatever side.
Hi, this is John Williams with the Fishery Report from Southeast Kentucky. At Lake Cumberland, striped bass fishing has been pretty good, mostly on live bait. It's like most of the fish have moved out of the creeks and onto the main lake on the mud flats. Most of those fish are less than 20 feet deep and decent size, around 26, 27 inches. So give those a try. Also in the district, all of our trout streams in the district have been stocked recently with trout, including Cane Creek in Laurel County, Bark Camp in Whitley, War Fork, Jackson County, Big Double in Clay, and Rock Creek in McQuarrie County. Those can be caught on a variety of baits, including live baits such as worms or even small spinner baits. And finally, if you're after big bass, I recommend going to Cedar Creek Lake. Recent electro fishing showed numerous bass over 20 inches there, so it's probably your best bet for catching a really nice largemouth bass. As always, good luck, good fishing.
This is Rob Roll in the Northwestern Fishery District. Our two major reservoirs, Rough River Lake and Nolin River Lake, are both at about 7 feet over summer pool, and also muddy, especially in the upper end. Anglers are catching a few bass with jigs and some other soft plastic baits. Crappie has slowed down on both reservoirs, so not much going on in the way of crappie anymore. They're moving back a little bit deeper. But our smaller impoundments, red ear and bluegill, have both been doing well. As the temperatures warm up, these fish are moving shallower, preparing to spawn. Some good bets for red ear in our area include Carpenter's Lake, Mauzay Lake, as well as Peabody Wildlife Management Area Lake. And for bluegill, try Carpenter's Lake as well as Peabody WMA Lake. Be safe out on the water. Always wear your life jacket. Good luck.
This is Kentucky Afield Radio. We'll answer the question we had a couple of minutes ago. When you're boating on a creek and you know that the water is legal for you to float upon, but the land underneath or along the sides is probably private, when can you be out of your boat and be there legally without the fear of being charged with trespassing? It's actually a three-part answer. One is if you have permission. Two, if you know that it's public land, such as a state park or a nature preserve. And three is if you are in the conduct of navigation. And conduct of navigation is actually a legal term. It means that you have to be out of your boat in order to make your way downstream, perhaps to rest your legs, to flip over a capsized canoe, or to portage your boat around a water hazard. That's when you can do it. More on summer boating after the break.
Swimming has taken me around the world.
Olympic swimming gold medalist Rachel Comazar.
It's a thrill to swim for your country, but it's another to swim for your life. In a boating accident, that's what happens. It can happen to you. You could be hurt, dazed, unconscious. Being a good swimmer isn't good enough. When fun turns frantic, trust me, your life jacket is as good as gold.
Kentucky Fish and Wildlife reminds you, your life jacket's got your back and the backing of the best swimmers everywhere.
Hi, this is Pam. I'm Charlie's girlfriend, and Kentucky Afield is my favorite radio show ever. Charlie's the best. All right, I did it. You owe me. Movies, dinner, a ring.
We are back with this run-up edition about summer boating, some watertight ideas for water safety, as we look National Safe Boating Week right in the face. It's coming up May 19th through the 25th. My name is Charlie Baglin. Conservation Officer Jared Alley, who patrols Lake Cumberland, is on the phone with me. And in the studio, Major Shane Carrier with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife Law Enforcement, and Zach Campbell, who runs boater education here in the Commonwealth. Your life jacket's got your back, the saying goes, but Zach, you were saying during the break that there is a new style of life jacket that might be a little bit more wearer-friendly.
One of the big things we run into with people not wanting to wear their personal flotation device or life jacket is that it's uncomfortable. The new technology with all the inflatable life jackets, they're extremely comfortable, and you barely even know they're on there. They give you great range of motion for waterfowl hunting or fishing.
I've seen these. It's like you can wear them practically under your shirt. You hardly know you've got them on.
That's correct.
And they fill up with a CO2 cartridge?
Mm-hmm. With today's technology, most of them are getting where they're automatic. They're water activated either by pressure or the presence of moisture.
The big old orange ugly horse collar type of life jackets is passing.
It is.
The safety never looked and felt so good.
That's correct.
So anyway, that's the minute message on life jackets. I'm going to say one thing you probably run into on occasion out on the water: proper identification on your boat.
It's a common violation, and state law requires that you have your registration numbers on your boat. It's spelled out exactly how those are to be in the guide. There's specific sizes, spacing requirements. You must have your current registration sticker on board so officers can readily identify that you've paid your registration fees and taxes for the year, similar to a motor vehicle where you put the sticker on your license plate. Changes color each year, and they all expire. Unlike your motor vehicle, your car, they all expire the same time every year for everybody, which is April 30th of each year. So
we'll go down this list in no particular order. Personal watercraft.
Dangerous.
True, but fun.
Fun, very fun.
So do I have to wear a life jacket when I do it? Do they have to be registered?
They fall under the same classification as any other motorboat. They do have to be registered. One difference on those is anyone who is operating those must have a U.S. Coast Guard approved life jacket on.
So you're wearing one, not just have it available.
Right. You have to have it on. It has to be buckled. It has to be fit for you. There's a high tendency, if you don't have those things buckled and on, if you hit the wave just the right way or the wrong way, if you come off those things, a lot of times you'll be thrown out of that life jacket. About the most dangerous time with a personal watercraft seems to be when you have two that are playing amongst each other and they end up in a crossing situation and they collide.
They're equivalent to a motorcycle on the water. They're small, they're fast, they're maneuverable.
I don't want to give folks on water scooters a bad name. To me, I look at them and say, that's got to be a blast.
It is.
I want to get out there and do that. But I'm chicken. I don't want to go fast. I don't want to jump wakes. Mm-hmm. And surely there's a bunch of people out there like me. You just want to just get out and drive down the water on them. Am I typical or am I atypical?
You're probably typical.
Yeah.
There's people who do use them the right way. The one problem that I've saw with them down here is it seems like at times they take over as a babysitter. A lot of times it's young kids or younger adults on those things that aren't really aware of the dangers involved. I think last summer it was not uncommon to find a 16, 17-year-old kid on one of these things at 10 or 11 at night, well after sunset.
Can you operate these at night?
You can't. That's another one difference between them and the rest of your vessels is sunset, those need to be off the water. They don't have navigation lighting on them, and you can't see them without that lighting.
You're talking about kids on water scooters. Zach, do they have to go through the boater red to be able to do that, or is it just automatically buy one and ride?
It's treated like a normal vessel. If you want to operate family vehicle and you're of the right age, you just take the boater education course, and it's not treated any different than Tammy wanting to drive the John boat or pontoon boat. But there
are no brakes on any boats, are there?
Correct. The lack of brakes on boats is a big factor in many of the accidents. People need to understand that they can't stop a boat as quickly as they can their car that they drove to the lake to get on the boat.
Let's talk about other little stuff in the water. Air mattresses, inflatable rafts, little things. If you were on Barkley Lake or wherever you are boating, and you're out there on a tube floating around,
you need to take into account where you're at. Safety is just as important in a tube as it is in other motorboats. You're in the water. You're using it as a conveyance on the water. We highly recommend that you wear a PFD. You're going to get out over your head. If you're on an inflatable, there's always that possibility that it starts losing air. You get way out from the bank over your head, and then your raft goes flat, or your air mattress, or one of these. We see people on these little floats like you would see on a swimming pool, and they're just asking for trouble when they get out that far and maybe lose their air pressure.
I want to talk about other small craft, and tread lightly here because I am one of these guys. Canoes, kayaks, sit-upons. How about John boats, the flat-bottom boats? No motors. You're self-propelled with a paddle or an oar. What's the minute message on laws concerning that?
Just as important as far as life jacket or PFD goes. And like you said, they're small. You sit up on them. Many of them are more unstable than your larger boats, so your likelihood of getting turned over or tossed in the water is higher. Your need for a PFD is still there. Many people think, well, this is just a small boat. I don't have a motor. I don't need a PFD, but you do by law. If you're paddling, that negates the need for registration. There's some differences in our regulations concerning those, but the safety message is still the same.
What if you're on Kentucky Lake and you decide to jump in because it's hot and swim? Boat drifts away. Can you swim in these places? Is there likelihood that boaters just won't see you? Sort of like a pedestrian on an interstate?
Absolutely. Whenever you swim in any of our waterways in Kentucky, there's not a lifeguard there close. And it's not like swimming in your neighborhood pool where you've got a lifeguard there for that purpose to save you if you get in trouble. You're swimming at your own risk, and there's a high likelihood that a boater is not going to see you. I recommend if you're going to swim, you get in an area that's not highly traveled. Get in a cove or somewhere where there's not a very big likelihood of a motorboat coming flying through and running over you.
People just need to look around, look at their surroundings, assess the situation, realize that there might be a safer place to do this. The day's going to end good because it was safe. Sometimes affects people's judgment is alcohol on the water, and that if I'm intoxicated, I might not choose the best place to swim. I might overestimate my swimming abilities. I might not wear my personal flotation device or life jacket. So it's just about knowing your surroundings.
That's correct.
Let's talk about boating under the influence then.
Well, we talked earlier about, and you said it, Charlie, that much of this stuff is common sense. be visible if you're swimming, wear your life jacket, things of that nature. And Zach said it exactly correct. Whenever you put alcohol into the equation, it definitely impairs your judgment, and that common sense many times goes out the window.
Major Carrier, can you drink and boat in Kentucky?
You cannot. It is against the law to consume alcoholic beverages in a public place here in Kentucky, and all of our waterways in Kentucky are considered public. Simply drinking it on the water is illegal, and then if you continue to drink and become intoxicated, you are subject to be arrested.
That will become obvious once you start operating that boat. When you approach a boat, at what point do you check for inebriation?
I check essentially every vessel that I pull up to. That may not be the purpose that I pulled up there, but if I'm up there checking any kind of safety equipment, or as soon as I pull up, it's usually obvious that there's some alcohol consumption going on, whether it be from beer cans laying in the floor of the vessel to just the operator's ability to comprehend what's going on, being able to answer a couple simple questions, or being able to find his safety equipment. When it comes to the point that based on my training and experience, that I think someone may be, borderline, or a lot of times it's just obvious that they've had way too much to drink to be out there to be operating anything. At that point, I'll go through a standard field sobriety test and check the level of impairment. Standard field sobriety,
that sounds just like a Kentucky State Trooper would do, a police officer would do.
It's very, very similar. Some of the tests are the exact same ones that they give to determine impairment in a motor vehicle.
And one thing that we go over in our Kentucky State Boating Education class is that alcohol affects you differently on the water. You may have 2 or 3 beers at the house on the couch and be fine, but on the water, due to the environmental stressors, sunlight, fatigue, dehydration, you might just be a little bit less in control of yourself if you're drinking on the water.
Heat, pounding sun, motion of the boat, I can see that.
That's part of our job, to ensure that the waterways are safe. We're not going to leave someone out there on the water that is intoxicated to the point that they can't operate a vessel or are a danger to themselves or others. But that's no different than you can go down here to your local restaurant or Applebee's and drink 2 or 3 beers with dinner. And if you're not intoxicated, you're not illegal to drive your vehicle home. So
makes good sense. Bottoms up can have a whole new meaning when you drink and boat, so use your head. We have a few more minutes with these experts in marine safety, so keep it anchored right here on Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin. The subject today is summer boating. Major Shane Carrier and Conservation Officer Jared Alley and boater education guru Zach Campbell are my guests. If your boat is approached by a conservation officer, is it an automatic ticket, or do you get a chance to plead your case?
Each officer has what we call officer discretion, and we're not going to take that away from them based on the situation that they encounter. No 2 situations are the same, so we want our officers to have that discretion. You're asking, is there a list of automatic citation violations? No. Each officer is going to look at each situation. I'll be perfectly honest with you, the attitude of the boater during the stop may be a determining factor on whether they get a citation or a courtesy notice. I would venture to say that an insufficient number of PFDs on board, as far as violations occur, that's probably rote the vast majority of the time across this state on the waters. We encourage it, as a matter of fact, from a command staff standpoint.
An insufficient number of PFDs on board, Major Carrier. Let me spell that out. PFD stands for Personal Flotation Device. Another name for that is life jacket. What are some of your other concerns?
We are especially concerned with children. No different than car seat laws on the road. Children under 12 are required to wear PFD on the boat when it's underway, and then if an officer stops you because you don't have one on your child, I'd be willing to bet you're going to get a citation unless you have a very, very good reason why not.
So let's talk about the ugly side of boating, and that's boating fatalities. What's the word?
Nationwide, U.S. Coast Guard reports, boating fatality statistics, state that they are going down. They've been dropping pretty steadily since 1998. They do fluctuate like all statistics, up and down. You can have a really bad year. For instance, 2011 was another high year. There were 758 boating fatalities. The year before that, 2010, there was only 672. As far as the state of Kentucky is concerned, we've definitely been dropping in the last 3 years. 2009, we had 23 compared to 8 in 2011.
You mentioned 1998. They started dropping. I remember that year because that was the year, of course, of the Safe Boating Act of 1998 here in Kentucky. And education became mandatory for a certain age of our boaters. To me, it would be the one thing that has led to the drop in boating fatalities.
Any education is good education, and a lot of those kids that were ordered to take the class back in 98 would be on the water nowadays. But one of the best things about having it mandatory for a certain group, even if it's kids to come in and take the class, a lot of times their parents will come with them. So yes, I do think that would have a big effect, and has had a big effect on our boating fatalities, because it's more people educated. Education equals safety, in my book, for sure.
Some years there are bad years. Is there a group of boaters, a class of boaters, that this is happening to more than others?
When we talk about fatalities, we try to group everyone. We think of motorboats, your outboard and your inboard recreational boaters. And like I said before, U.S. Coast Guard statistics state that boating fatalities are falling. But there is a certain subcategory of boating fatalities that is on the rise. That's canoers, kayaks. A new thing that's taken the nation by storm is stand-up paddleboards. We haven't seen a lot of those in Kentucky yet, but they are the West Coast. They're everywhere. I saw a few on Lake Cumberland. There's been some on Green River Lake, and they just don't feel that they're boaters a lot of the time. All these different vessels, the kayaks, the canoes, and stand-up paddleboards, the people that are operating these, they are boaters. You're seeing a lot of people on the water that wouldn't be on the water before because they couldn't afford a boat. So that's become a problem nationwide. That's kind of skewing the statistics in a negative way.
So regardless of the number of fatalities a state would have, it's Kentucky or Indiana or California, doesn't matter. Sounds like the one thing you're saying is if they had been wearing a life jacket, chances are they would have lived?
Definitely. Like our world-famous PSA says, your life jacket's got your back, and it doesn't, like we talked about before, it doesn't matter if you're wearing an inflatable belt pack, you're wearing one of the new inflatables, you're wearing a big, bulky horse collar, you need to wear your life jacket. It'll save your life. Your life jacket's always got your back.
Officer Alley, you are an investigator of boating accidents where you patrol every nook and cranny of Lake Cumberland. Do you see a trend in boating accidents that, well, if they had just been doing A or B, wearing a life jacket or going slower, this wouldn't have happened? Or are there some that just aren't that easily explained? What do you see down there?
Operator inattention. It's the driver of the vessel not being aware of his surroundings. Most of the major accidents that we've had in the last several years, alcohol has been that common denominator. I'm
going to presume that you could go out on the water and have a heart attack. You could go out there and die of heat exhaustion. A boat could come and hit you straight on, and you are dead. I don't care if you're wearing 20 life jackets. But if you go in the water, chances are you're going to drown if you're not wearing one and are injured or dazed. Can you separate them like that, sort of a natural causes to ones that you don't have a chance, it doesn't matter what?
The one thing that stands out to me is that most of these marinas, most of these access points on this lake, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have a big sign put up. It lists a total number of fatalities or drownings, which usually the accidents, if there is a death occurs, a lot of time drowning is what the actual cause of death is. The accident led to the drowning, or the collision led to the drowning, but when a lot of those people had their life jackets on, they would have survived it.
Jared, I've worn your phone out unless you're on a landline, but I sure appreciate you being with me.
Hey, thank you all. Thank you all.
Buddy, I'm telling you, an hour flies by, and I'm glad all three of you stopped in to talk about boating safety. It's going to be a great summer. Anytime you can say a lot in just a few words, you're ahead of the game. And boating has had some real good ones over the years. Maybe you remember some of these. Safety, That's a watertight idea from your Kentucky Water Patrol. Sometimes a day on a boat isn't a day at the beach. Bottoms up has a whole new meaning when you drink and boat. Don't go overboard with excitement. Don't be a boating fool. I remember this, I liked it. Skipper, don't skip the life jackets. Keep the good times afloat. Safe boating begins on solid ground. Boat safe, boat sober. How about this? Boat safely. Make sure your first mate isn't your last. The phrase today that sort of zips up the idea is your life jacket's got your back. And the backing of your family and loved ones who want to see you come home safely. We'll have these fellas back later in the summer for an update. Meanwhile, I am Charlie Baglin, inviting you to come back in 1 week. We will go inside outdoors again on Kentucky Afield Radio.